This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
How to share a game. In 2013, PlayStation needed just one joke to explain why physical games mattered. One person handed a disc to another person. That was it. No account transfer, no license menu, no internet check. Just ownership. And more importantly, your ownership. And only 13 short years later, that clip feels less like an advert and more of a parody. On the 1st of July 2026, Sony Interactive Entertainment announced that physical disc production for all new games releasing on PlayStation consoles will stop from January 2028. After that point, new games will be sold through the PlayStation Store and through retailers in digital formats only. Games already released on disc and games released on disc before the cutoff though will not be affected. So this isn't just a rumor, and it's not simply the next PlayStation being offered with an optional digital model like the PS5 was. It's a confirmed deadline for new PlayStation discs. Oh PlayStation, how far you have fallen. It looks as if the limit of the PlayStation vision is now the exact dimensions of shareholder value. I did not want to make this video as a knee-jerk reaction. I wanted to sit with the announcement, check the dates, and actually ask what it means for us, the players. Because this isn't just about wanting to collect memorabilia or plastic boxes. It's about lending, reselling, preservation, and more importantly, your ownership of something you've parted with your hard-earned cash to buy. Why this is personal to me. My favorite game, Kingdom Hearts, came into my life because my best friend had finished it, and one day he asked me a simple question. Do you want to borrow this for a bit? That exchange helped shape who I am today. It was possible because the game was an object that he could physically hand to me after he already had his enjoyment. I also have a framed disc from a family member because of the hours I poured into Naruto Ninja Storm 2 on Xbox 360. And I first bought it secondhand because that was the only affordable way I could get into it. This isn't just a one-off case either. Lending, gifting, and buying used games are genuinely part of the gaming culture. It's how the gaming culture spreads between friends, family, siblings, and the most important, generations. You can still play a digital code, but the physical disc is what tells the story.
What's that supposed to mean?
So you might be asking, why removing discs is actually bad for the players? Firstly, physical games provide price competition. A digital-only PlayStation market doesn't mean that every retailer disappears, because Sony has said retailers can still sell digital products. But a code is not the same competitive mechanism as a disc. A disc can be discontinued, cleared, bundled, traded in, resold, and gifted. A digital license can't circulate through the second-hand market in the same way. When a disc disappears, the platform holder gains more control over distribution, and the consumer loses alternatives. The sales will still happen, but the market has fewer independent pressure points. There is no used copy undercutting the official price and no trade-in value helping to fund the next purchase. Secondly, lending and gifting just simply becomes much harder. Sony's 2013 video understood this perfectly. A disc lets you share a complete experience without needing to share an account, expose potential payment information, or depend on a platform-specific family sharing policy. We know how these things start and we know how they end. Thirdly, digital purchases usually operate through licenses governed by terms and platform infrastructure. That doesn't mean Sony can casually erase every purchase tomorrow, and the company says legacy purchases will remain downloadable for the quote-unquote foreseeable future. But foreseeable is not the same as permanent. Store closures, delistings, expired licenses, account problems, and server shutdowns all create dependencies that a self-contained playable disc can reduce. We should also be honest. Not every modern disc is a perfect archive. Some games need large patches, online servers, or even additional downloads. Physical media is not a magic preservation solution. It also crumbles into dust, as we all do. but removing discs eliminates one of the strongest consumer-controlled copies we have instead of trying to improve it. Fourthly, there's the impact on shops and services built around physical media. CEX, GameStop, independent retailers, rental services, distributors, printers, and logistic workers all sit inside this ecosystem. I'll admit, some of those businesses are far from perfect, but their existence gives consumers more ways to buy, sell, and discover games. And as consumers, choice is the one thing we all should appreciate. And lastly, the most important point in my opinion is affordability. A console is supposed to be a focused, relatively accessible way to play games, a source of cheap entertainment. If the hardware becomes more expensive due to all the issues we're having with RAM, and online multiplayer remains behind a subscription, storage needs to rise, and every new game is locked to a digital distribution, then I think people will start to fairly ask, what value is the closed console ecosystem still providing? So, how did we get here? To understand why the reaction is so strong with PlayStation fans, we need to go back to 2013. Microsoft's original Xbox One plan included a 24-hour online check-in, which complicated restrictions around used games. Sony saw that opening, and in my opinion, they rightfully exploited it. At E3, it promised that PS4 discs could be shared and resold, and then released that brutally simple instruction video, the one you saw at the start of the video. The backlash worked. On the 19th of June 2013, Microsoft reversed the Xbox One policies. It removed the 24-hour check-in and said disc-based games could be traded, lent, resold, gifted, and rented as they had previously been done on the Xbox 360. That moment matters because it proves consumer pressure can move even the biggest platforms. Then came 2021. Sony announced plans to close the PS3 and PS Vita stores, only to reverse course after the response from the players. Sony had said it made the wrong decision and it kept those stores open. Again, customer pushback mattered. But on the 1st of July 2026, Sony returned to both issues at once. Alongside the disc announcement, it confirmed a staged shutdown of the PlayStation Store on PS3 and PS Vita. The PS3 stores close in Latin America and Middle Eastern markets in the late 2026s, and the PS3 and PS Vita stores close in all remaining countries in July 2027. Sony has previously said that purchase content will remain downloadable for the quote-unquote foreseeable future, but that any new purchases will stop. And to me, it's interesting because I think we can all see that timing is painfully ironic. On the same day Sony set an end to new disc productions, it also set an end date for buying games from two older digital storefronts. One announcement says the future is digital, the other clearly reminds us that digital shops do not stay open forever despite your money being gone forever. Additionally, the wider console market is becoming more expensive too. Microsoft has announced major Xbox hardware price rises from the 1st of August 2026 and the end of its 2TB model. Although it's not Sony news, it reinforces the same concern that this video wants to get across. The old promise that console gaming becomes cheaper and more accessible over time is under pressure. So, the data and why context matters. So, the responsible conclusion is not that nobody wants digital. Millions of players clearly value its convenience. I myself only play FIFA with the digital copy so that I don't have to swap between games. The conclusion is that transaction share does not give a platform holder permission to erase the choice. Choosing digital where a disc exists is not the same as consenting to a market in which the disc is forbidden. There's another warning in Sony's timing. On the same day it argued that digital access reflects consumer preference, it announced that PS3 and PS Vita users will lose the ability to make new purchases through these stores by July 2027. Previously purchased content remains downloadable only for the foreseeable future. And the reason I'm repeating this point is because it's very important. The company is asking players to trust a digital-only future while demonstrating that digital storefronts have a finite commercial life. Effectively, you're leasing your games until Sony decide they no longer want to support that lease. And then, to top it off, on the 24th of July 2026, the PlayStation Network went down across Sony's gaming services. They stated this lasted roughly a span of 5 hours, but many gamers, including myself, knew it went on much longer. I don't think I was able to play pro clubs for about 2 to 3 days. Players reported being unable to sign in, use the PlayStation Store, download games, or verify some digital licenses. Online dependent games were obviously affected, but the sharper irony was that some people also could not launch digitally purchased games because the console could not confirm the license. To be precise, it didn't make every downloadable game unplayable. There are some games that have an offline capability. But the outage showed that digital ownership can depend on an authentication service, even when the software is actually already sitting in your storage. The timing could hardly have made Sony's argument look any worse if it tried. 23 days after announcing the new PlayStation disc will come to an end, the network suffered an outage that temporarily prevented its key customers from accessing the digital games that Sony says are the future. A disc could not solve server-dependent multiplayer or live service requirements or every modern license check, but a playable physical copy reduces the number of moments in which permission from a remote server stands between you and the game you have paid for. I think there's a lot of interesting comparisons to be made, but most importantly, I want to move the discussion from symbolism to simply market power. Physical retailers can independently discount old stock and used copies. We've all waited for a game to age before we buy it to reduce the price, or just buy it secondhand. A digital-only ecosystem narrows that competition and removes the option. On screen, you can see a screenshot of a game currently that I can purchase physically and what its value is on the PlayStation Store. I'm not saying that physical games are always cheaper, but it is a good comparison, as there's no incentive for Sony to ever reduce the digital copy value. Some of the tweets you've been seeing before and now here are valuable as a testimony, but they're not a replacement for data. But they do have their uses because they show that Sony's phrase of how most of our community prefers to access and play games does not capture the whole community. The reaction is full of people explaining why they buy used games, lend games, collector's editions, compare retailer prices, or rely on discs when licenses and storefronts fail. Context also changes by game, territory, and price. A global platform average can conceal markets where discs remain stronger, major releases where boxed copies carry a much larger share, and customers who choose digital only because the physical edition is unavailable or costs more at that moment. But the same data can tell another story. Sony reported 317.9 million full game software units during the year. If 78% were digital, the remaining 22% implies roughly 70 million physical full game unit sales. The estimate is not an official package unit total and should be taken with a pinch of salt, but it does demonstrate the scale hidden behind the percentage. A minority share can still represent a market of tens of millions of purchases. As I said before, that doesn't make Sony's data fake. Digital buying is clearly dominant. The manipulation is in the leap from most recorded full game transactions were digital to most of our community prefers the physical option to be abolished. The first is a sales measurement, but the second is a claim about consumer preference that the published ratio alone cannot prove. More importantly, the ratio can include games that have no physical edition. If a title is only available digitally, every sale is automatically counted on the digital side. For example, digital-only consoles, digital-only releases, subscription-driven discovery. Retailers' stock decisions and deeper digital discounts all shape the result. The statistic records what was sold inside the market Sony and the publishers designed. It doesn't isolate a free choice between two equally available formats. The denominator matters too. Sony calls this its full game software digital download ratio. It measures digital downloads as a share of full game unit sales on the PS4 and the PS5. It is not a survey of what customers would prefer if each game were offered physically and digitally at the same price. It also should not be confused with the share of total PlayStation revenue, which includes hardware, add-on content, subscriptions, and other services. The figure we discussed previously is real, but the way it's presented can be misled. 85% was a quarterly peak for January to March 2026. Sony's reported quarterly ratios were 83%, 72%, 76%, and 85%. Across the whole financial year, the ratio was 78%. Using the highest quarter as if it represents the entire year makes the shift look more complete than Sony's own annual picture. This is the section where Sony's framing needs the most scrutiny in my opinion. Sony says the end of new discs is a response to consumer preference. The statistic most often used to support that story is an 85% digital download ratio for full game software on PS4 and PS5 in the final quarter of the financial year 2025. But that is usually when most deals go on, which is why they would see a natural spike in the digital downloads, because at that point it is cheaper than the physical copy. So what does this mean for PS6? Well, the announcement naturally raises questions about the PlayStation 6, but this is where we need to be precise. Sony has not officially announced the PS6 price, backwards compatibility policy, the launch date, monthly online license checks, or final disk drive configuration. It is reasonable though for us to infer that a PlayStation console launching after January 2028 would be designed around digital distribution. It is not responsible to state as a fact it will cost £1,000 or more, remove all backwards compatibility, or require a monthly verification check. These are risks and predictions and not confirmed features. However, if I was a gambling man, I would bet all of those things to be true. So, what can the players do? Some physical media companies and developers have already pushed back. Aterium Game Studios pledged to work urgently to bring its games physically to the shelves before the early 2028 deadline. Some Twitter users have said physical games are vital to preservation, ownership, and consumer choice. These reactions show that the ecosystem does not have to accept the transition silently. If, like me, you disagree with Sony's decision, the response needs to be focused and measurable. We do not, under any circumstance, harass developers, support staff, or community managers. We do have direct criticism at the policy and decision makers. Where possible, buy physical editions where they exist, especially from publishers that make complete and well-produced releases. Buy used games if affordability and circulation matters to you. Keep lending, gifting, and trading alive. Do not pre-order digital copies by default. Compare the physical and digital options first, and only make the purchase once you have figured out what is the best option for yourself. Review recurring subscriptions and keep only the services that provide value to you. Cancelling should always be considered an option, and it's not a demand that people stop enjoying the games they play. You can write to PlayStation through official feedback channels asking for an operational disc program and potential long-term download guarantees. And most of all, continue playing games with your friends. The goal isn't to stop playing games. The goal is essentially to stop rewarding policies that reduce consumer choice and make gaming worse for us. Remember, we're here to have fun. Spend deliberately. Make the reason viable. Companies do track sales, subscriptions, sentiment, and retention. So hit them where it hurts, their pockets. Give them a signal that they can understand. We have historical proof that organized consumer reaction can work. Microsoft reversed the Xbox One decision in 2023, Sony reversed the PS3 and Vita closure plan in 2021, and a decision that announced today can still be challenged tomorrow. PlayStation once built an entire marketing victory around the idea that sharing a game should be as easy as handing it to a friend. The idea wasn't nostalgia. It was consumer freedom made simple. They got it, and we got it. Physical games are imperfect. They do have their flaws, but they create options that digital licenses struggle to replace. Direct lending, gifting, price competition. Sony says that these changes follow consumer trends, but consumers are allowed to answer back. We can say that convenience matters, but so does control. We can embrace downloads without accepting that every single alternative must disappear. And this is my personal message to you, Sony. Remember what your own name promises. In a world obsessed with productivity, perpetual growth, and turning every quiet moment into another subscription, you are supposed to be a station of play, not a station to pay. I'm Etheshadowman, and at least until 2028, keep gaming, and more importantly, keep choosing how you game.